The galaxy was old, filled with empires that had risen and fallen long before humanity ever reached for the stars. Among the countless civilizations, most had forgotten what it meant to struggle, to claw survival from the jaws of a hostile world. For species that grew under gentle suns and on fertile worlds, the concept of war was little more than a tactical equation, a game of numbers and machinery. Victory depended on resources, not resilience. That was the wisdom passed down for centuries, until the humans arrived. To the coalition, they were latecomers, barely stepping into interstellar society. Primitive in technology, erratic in behavior, and undeniably aggressive. The archives showed a planet drowning in conflict, wars that scarred continents, weapons of annihilation that had threatened their own species, and an endless cycle of competition. From the perspective of the elder races, Earth was a cautionary tale of what happened when violence outpaced enlightenment. The humans were tolerated, studied, and contained within diplomatic courtesies. Yet curiosity soon turned to unease. Reports trickled through the coalition's intelligence network. A frontier colony had been attacked by raiders, mercenaries hired by rivals. Against expectation, the humans did not fold. They fought back with unflinching ferocity, deploying ground forces that inflicted staggering losses. What unsettled observers was not merely their tactics, but the psychology behind them. Human soldiers advanced under fire when most species would retreat. They rallied around wounded comrades instead of abandoning them. They adapted, improvising weapons from debris, turning even desperation into strategy. It was not technology that kept them alive, it was a refusal to yield. For the coalition, this was concerning. Wars in their own history had been brief, decided by overwhelming firepower and submission. Resistance was irrational. Yet here was a species that did not treat war as an aberration but as an art honed over millennia. An emergency council was convened. Voices argued that humans posed no real threat, that their armies were clumsy compared to automated legions. Others disagreed, pointing to the psychological factor, fear spreading through troops unaccustomed to opponents who refused surrender. Their weapons are crude, one strategist declared, but their resolve makes them dangerous. Another added, they fight as if death itself were merely an obstacle, not an end. It was decided then, an assessment must be made. A campaign would be launched, not for conquest, but to measure the true capacity of human warfare. The target would be a forward human colony, defended only by their regular military. No experimental weapons, no super soldiers, just the ordinary men and women trained under Earth's banners. If they broke easily, the matter would be settled. If not, precautions would have to be taken. The invasion began with clinical precision. Alien warships breached orbit, deploying mechanized regiments with calculated confidence. The defenders had little warning, but what followed shocked even the most hardened commanders. Human forces met the invasion with a discipline that defied expectation. Columns of armored vehicles rolled into defensive positions, artillery thundered with punishing rhythm, and infantry spread across ruined streets with tactical coordination. To the invaders, it looked less like defense and more like predation. Every street became a kill zone. Every ruined structure concealed sharpshooters. When plasma barrages scorched through defenses, the humans did not scatter. They reformed. They counterattacked. Tanks emerged from hidden embankments, unleashing salvos that shattered armored walkers. Even as casualties mounted, the soldiers pressed forward, using smoke, drones, and sheer audacity to regain ground. Alien commanders soon realized the scale of their miscalculation. Casualty reports flooded in. Units that had been trained for sterile, mechanical victories now faced an enemy that fought with primal defiance. The humans shouted war cries, sang under bombardments, and dragged the wounded to safety even when it cost them their own lives. This was not strategy as the coalition understood it. This was something older, something savage, something terrifying. An intercepted transmission revealed the mindset of Earth's defenders. We hold the line, not one step back. To the coalition, such orders bordered on madness. To the humans, it was duty. The first week of the campaign became a nightmare. Alien troops found themselves fighting not against individuals, but against a collective will. Defenses that should have collapsed endured. Villages turned into fortresses. Forests became ambush zones. Every attempt to establish control was met with counterstrikes that seemed fueled less by logistics and more by sheer rage. Psychological reports painted a grim picture. Soldiers who had faced humans returned trembling, speaking of eyes that burned with defiance, of enemies who laughed while bleeding, of foes who kept advancing no matter how many fell. Machines could be destroyed. Drones could be outmaneuvered. But the humans, they adapted, they endured, they refused to break. Commanders attempted to rationalize the losses. It is only their regular army, they told themselves. These are not elites, not experimental units, just ordinary soldiers. Yet the word ordinary began to lose meaning, for in their ordinariness lay something extraordinary. The ability to fight beyond reason, to transform pain into resolve, to make war a matter not of machines but of spirit. The coalition attempted escalation. Airstrikes were intensified. Artillery bombardments stretched across days. Yet every blow seemed to strengthen resistance. Bridges destroyed were replaced with makeshift crossings overnight. Supply lines cut were rerouted through ingenuity. Even when communication was severed, squads acted independently, guided by instinct and training rather than paralysis. Alien analysts compared this to their own militaries. Troops trained for efficiency, not endurance, would falter once command structures collapsed. But the humans were different. They thrived in chaos. They welcomed uncertainty. Where others froze, they improvised. The longer the campaign dragged, the more the invaders feared what they had unleashed. This was not war as they understood it. This was survival distilled into its purest form. Each human soldier fought as though carrying the weight of an entire species on their shoulders. And perhaps they were, for humanity's history had forged them in the fires of endless conflict, teaching them that to live was to struggle, and to struggle was to fight. One alien officer described the experience in a trembling report. "We came expecting prey. We found predators. They are not content to defend, they hunt us." Another wrote, "Their eyes are not the eyes of soldiers. They are the eyes of creatures who have fought extinction and won." And yet, in the darkest hours, as alien casualties mounted and morale shattered, a terrifying realization began to take shape. This was only the beginning. These were not humanity's champions. These were not their elites. This was not their finest. This was merely their regular army. The Coalition Council struggled to comprehend it. If these ordinary humans could repel an invasion force and inflict such disproportionate losses, then what would their specialized units be capable of? What horrors had Earth forged in secrecy, hidden behind the facade of conventional defense? Rumors spread, whispered in alien barracks, that the humans had soldiers who did not merely fight wars but embodied them. Beings trained to move unseen, to strike without warning, to dismantle empires from within. The regular army was terrifying enough, but the shadow of something greater loomed beyond it. The council dismissed such fears as exaggerations. Legends born of desperation, they argued, stories to rationalize defeat. But the soldiers who had faced humanity knew better. They had seen the defiance in human eyes. They had heard the war cries echoing through ruined streets. They had watched men and women fight on broken limbs, refusing to yield. If that was the ordinary, then what did the extraordinary look like? The invasion faltered. Reinforcements were called back, fleets redirected, strategies rewritten. The coalition had tested humanity and found not weakness but strength. And in the silence that followed, one question remained, whispered in dread across command halls and council chambers alike. If this is their regular army, what happens when we meet the ones they call special? They had seen the fury of human armies and thought they had glimpsed the height of what Earth could unleash. The coalition had retreated to lick its wounds, convinced that humanity's conventional forces were the true terror. Yet behind closed doors in hushed reports and intercepted transmissions, another name circulated. Not legions, not divisions, something smaller, sharper, quieter. Units that did not exist on paper but left devastation in their wake. The whispers called them special forces. To the alien mind, the idea made little sense. Why train a handful when armies could overwhelm? Why spend years shaping soldiers when machines could be built by the thousands? But humanity's logic was different. Their wars had taught them that battles were not always decided by mass or by firepower. Sometimes they were decided by shadows. Sometimes the course of history bent under the weight of a dozen men moving unseen. The first sign came quietly. A coalition command outpost, heavily fortified, protected by drones and energy fields, suddenly went dark. Hours later, a transmission surfaced. Commanders executed, supplies destroyed, systems corrupted. There had been no battle, no alarms, no recorded entry. Survivors spoke of shapes in the dark, of silent figures who moved through defenses as though the laws of war did not apply to them. At first, the coalition dismissed it as sabotage. Perhaps local resistance fighters, perhaps rogue elements. But then it happened again, and again. Entire regiments woke to find their leaders gone, assassinated in their sleep. Weapon stockpiles exploded without warning. Communications flickered, disrupted with a precision no machine could replicate. Fear spread like wildfire. Soldiers began to see shadows where none existed, to flinch at every sound, to mistrust every silence. It was no longer war. It was haunting, and the humans, it seemed, had become specters. The coalition had studied human regular armies, dissected their strategies, predicted their tactics, but special forces followed no script. They improvised on a level beyond comprehension, using terrain, weather, and psychology as tools of war. They fought not for territory, but for terror. Every strike was calculated not only to inflict damage, but to unhinge the enemy's mind. Alien officers spoke of soldiers who moved like ghosts, their faces hidden, their presence felt only in the aftermath. They left calling cards of silence, areas where nothing lived and nothing functioned. Patrols vanished into forests, never to return. Convoys found their fuel poisoned, their supplies vanished. And when survivors stumbled back, they carried stories that eroded morale far faster than plasma fire. Human special forces were not built to win battles, they were built to shatter certainty. And the coalition, unaccustomed to uncertainty, began to unravel. Analysts attempted to study the phenomenon. They mapped the attacks, tracked patterns, sought logic, but logic failed them. One week, a starport would fall to sabotage. The next, a commander would be snatched from the heart of a fortress without a trace. Then came the most unsettling blow. Coalition fleets, secure in orbit, found their targeting systems corrupted, their weapons firing into empty space. When the systems were recovered, a single human transmission played on every channel. "You are not safe." That was when the whispers turned to dread. Special forces were more than soldiers. They were a philosophy distilled into human form. Selected from the strongest, the most resilient, the most adaptable, they trained not only to fight but to think, to endure, to overcome any environment. On Earth, they were tested against jungles, deserts, oceans, mountains, and even their own limits. Pain was not an end but a tool. Fear was not a weakness but a weapon to be mastered. The coalition could not understand such conditioning because no other species had ever required it. Their worlds were safe. Earth was not. Humanity's elites were carved from hardship, and they carried that legacy with them into the stars. Alien survivors described them in broken voices. Some swore they could see their eyes glowing in the dark. Others spoke of movements so precise that they seemed mechanical, but when checked, no machine could replicate it. Captured recordings showed blurred figures slipping through defenses, striking with brutal efficiency, then vanishing like smoke. No patterns, no mercy. The impact was catastrophic. Coalition soldiers refused to patrol at night. Officers rotated command every few hours to avoid being targeted. Bases diverted entire divisions just to guard against an enemy that might be only a handful strong. But the more resources they poured into defense, the weaker their offensives became. Human special forces were not just killing soldiers, they were killing morale, strategy, and willpower. One commander wrote in his final report before desertion, "We are not fighting men, we are fighting phantoms. They do not come for victory, they come for fear, and they have already won." Humanity had found its edge. Where armies battered the enemy into submission, special forces dismantled them from within. They struck at the heart, not the shield. And each operation was a message. Humans were not only strong in numbers, but in the hands of the few they were unstoppable. The coalition tried to adapt. They armed their troops with sensors, drones, enhanced surveillance. They saturated the skies with patrols, lit entire regions with artificial suns. But shadows remained. Shadows always remained. Because the strength of humanity's special forces was not in invisibility, it was in inevitability. No matter how secure the defenses, no matter how strong the walls, they would find a way. And the knowledge that they would find a way was what broke their enemies. By the time the coalition realized the depth of their mistake, it was too late. Armies that had once boasted of superiority now fought against their own fear. Every order was questioned. Every patrol ended in paranoia. Leaders turned on each other, suspecting betrayal. And through it all, the humans advanced, their special forces clearing paths unseen, breaking the spine of resistance before the main army ever arrived. The coalition had believed the human regular army to be terrifying, and they had been right. But special forces were something else entirely. They were not an army. They were not even soldiers in the conventional sense. They were instruments of inevitability, sharpened to a point so fine it cut through the very idea of security. Aliens no longer whispered about them. They prayed never to encounter them. And when the name of humanity was spoken in council chambers, it was no longer accompanied by disdain. It was accompanied by silence. A silence born of fear, of memory, of the shadows that had slipped through their defenses and dismantled their pride piece by piece. And somewhere deep in the corridors of power, one alien strategist asked the question none wanted to face. If these are only a fraction of their kind, what happens when humanity decides to unleash them fully? The coalition thought the storm had passed, that retreat and regrouping would buy them time to analyze, adapt, and prepare countermeasures. But time only deepened their dread. Humanity had shown them armies that refused to break and specialists who moved like shadows. The next stage was inevitable, and it came not as a single strike, but as a campaign that stretched across the stars. The war escalated beyond colonies and outposts. Now it reached the galactic scale, into the heart of contested systems. Fleets descended with precision, their goal simple: to crush humanity before the legend grew too large. But in their arrogance, they failed to understand that legends cannot be crushed. They spread. Coalition admirals calculated victory in numbers. Dozens of ships against a handful, entire divisions against regiments. They thought overwhelming force would solve what subtlety could not. Yet the first weeks taught them another lesson. The more pressure applied, the stronger humans became. Where fleets tightened their noose, human special forces slipped behind their lines, sabotaging supply routes, crippling engines, leaving warships stranded in silence. Where armies dug in, regular soldiers counterattacked with ferocity, supported by unseen allies who struck command posts before the battle even began. It was not brute strength that unnerved the coalition. It was orchestration. Humans did not fight battles, they composed them. Regular troops provided the rhythm, hammering relentlessly, while special forces inserted the discordant notes that shattered harmony. Together they turned campaigns into symphonies of chaos, and the coalition found themselves not fighting an enemy, but surviving a performance designed to break them. In one system, Entire fleets arrived to besiege a human stronghold. Weeks of bombardment should have reduced it to rubble. Instead, the attackers woke to find their fuel depots destroyed in a single night. Their admirals, once confident, were discovered executed in their own quarters. Even as they scrambled to regroup, human transmissions filled every channel. "You are already defeated." The coalition had faced resilient species before. They had fought cunning adversaries. But humans were both, amplified beyond comprehension. They thrived not in comfort but in adversity. What other species called desperation, they called instinct. Where others faltered under loss, they grew stronger. Every destroyed city became a rallying point. Every fallen soldier became a reason to fight harder. Humanity turned suffering into momentum. Alien scholars struggled to put it into words. Some argued that humanity's evolution on a world filled with predators and disasters had carved resilience into their DNA. Others believed it was cultural, a legacy of countless wars that had conditioned them to see conflict as a forge rather than a failure. But soldiers on the front lines had no need for theories. They only knew one truth: humans could not be broken, and those who tried ended up broken instead. The breaking point came not from a single battle but from a realization. Coalition generals began to see patterns too late. Every time they concentrated forces, humans struck elsewhere. Every time they secured supply lines, they collapsed from sabotage. Every time they thought the war predictable, the humans rewrote it. What terrified them most was that humans seemed to anticipate their reactions, as if reading their playbook before it was written. The truth was simple. Humanity had lived on the edge of annihilation for so long that unpredictability was second nature. They did not plan in straight lines. They wove contingencies within contingencies. Even when defeated, they learned faster than their enemies could recover. Defeat to humans was not the end. It was instruction. Alien soldiers confessed under interrogation that they no longer feared human weapons. They feared human eyes. Eyes that looked at them not with malice, but with the certainty of predators who had already decided the outcome. Machines could be switched off, walls could be broken, but the human gaze pierced deeper, promising that resistance was futile not because of overwhelming strength, but because of unyielding will. Coalition command debated the unthinkable: extermination. Some argued that humanity must be erased before their influence spread, but others knew the truth: it was already too late. Even in loss, even in destruction, humans left an imprint that could not be erased. Entire species within the coalition began to question their leaders, whispering that perhaps it was wiser to ally with humanity than to fight them. Fear turned to respect, respect into reluctant admiration. The final campaign sealed the legend. Special forces struck simultaneously across 3 systems, toppling key leaders, dismantling infrastructure, and broadcasting a single message: "This war is over when we say it is." And then, as though to prove they were not conquerors, humans did not occupy or enslave. They dismantled only what was necessary, then stepped back, daring their enemies to continue. Most did not. Philosophers in alien academies struggled to explain what they had witnessed. War, to them, had always been about control, dominance, superiority. But humanity revealed another truth. War was survival sharpened to its purest edge. Humans did not fight for conquest. They fought because they had always fought. Their planet had demanded it. Their history had refined it. Their spirit had embraced it. They were not merely warriors, they were survival incarnate. The coalition capitulated not with treaties but with silence. No grand declaration marked the end. Battles simply ceased. Fleets withdrew. Soldiers deserted. And in the emptiness that followed, the galaxy was left with a new hierarchy carved not by ancient empires, but by the species they had underestimated. Even in peace, the memory lingered. Aliens spoke of the regular armies as storms, loud, overwhelming, unstoppable. But they spoke of the special forces as something else entirely. They were whispers in the dark, inevitabilities in flesh, shadows that turned fear into reality. They were humanity's sharpest edge, and they had left scars across the stars deeper than any weapon could carve. In time, the coalition rebuilt. But in every war game, every strategy, there was always a question left unspoken. What if the humans come? Their simulations no longer measured victory, only survival. Their leaders no longer asked how to win, but how long they could last. The humans had not conquered them, yet they lived as though conquered, their pride gutted by shadows and their fear immortalized in memory. And humanity. They returned to their world, to their colonies, to their rebuilding. They did not boast. They did not gloat. For them, it was another war among many. Another reminder that survival was never given, only earned. But for the galaxy, it was a revelation. The species they had dismissed as primitives had shown them the face of inevitability. Aliens once thought humanity's regular army was terrifying. Then they met the special forces. And the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again.